This right here is what many people believe to be the hardest campaign ever made, and it's Halo 2's legendary difficulty. Consisting of 14 different missions, boasting a variety of different environments, but also this. This mission right here, Gravemind, is what some people believe to be one of the hardest missions ever created. But without further ado, let's venture into the first mission on this journey, the Armory. Despite the journey ahead of us, the Armory acts as a way to teach us the basics, calibrating our mobility and our shield for combat purposes.
Move around a little, get a feel for it. When you're ready, come meet me by the zapper. Hey, take it easy!
What? Hey, my bad. Upon getting introduced to Sergeant Johnson, our first real mission begins, Cairo Station. Whilst celebrations are happening on one side of the galaxy, there seems to be some type of public execution going on elsewhere. A fleet began to approach the station, and we soon got to work. Whilst the first engagements didn't hold too much of a challenge, they taught me well to use all of the cover that I had available. Never had I seen enemies so humbling. If you're out of position, you're dead.
The demon is dead by my hand.
Where I found the most trouble, however, was in the hangar. A short ways into the mission, you'll pass through a door and arrive at the feet of 5 different waves of enemies, largely consisting of elites. Elites are where the large proportion of my misery had come from. Not only does it feel as if they have aimbot sometimes, but they have a shield larger than that of any other enemy type. But what's worse is that you never just fight one, they always come in packs. This hangar right here was my first real introduction into having to deal with elites properly. Now there was a lot I had to learn, but thankfully the game places an absurd amount of grenades at the entry point into the hangar, so you can easily get away with cleverly placing the grenades that you throw, and not actually having to fight too many of the elites. Unfortunately, that wasn't the worst part. Just past that hangar was another one, where the game had enough of holding your hand, and thus forcing you to get through this with pure game knowledge and skill. It didn't help that this was actually my first time ever playing Halo 2. So I wasn't aware of what weapons were better for what instances, and so I had to learn out of pure experimentation. Thankfully, there was one weapon more important than anything else, which I soon became knowledgeable of. Almost all minor enemy types carry this plasma pistol, allowing you to find it almost anywhere in the galaxy. The special thing about this is its charge shot. This plasma pistol does 50% extra damage to shields, our current biggest obstacle when it comes to our killing capability. However, it also does 65% less damage to unshielded enemies, so it's not exactly the best weapon to carry alone. And that's why, when pairing this plasma pistol with almost any other type of weapon, allows you to be able to kill elites in a fraction of the time that it takes us right now. Simply one charge shot with the plasma pistol, swap weapon, and shoot them in the head. Whilst sounding simple, it does still remain quite the challenge. That alone doesn't mean that you're now playing on easy mode. You still need to take advantage of your environment and play to each and every single enemy's weaknesses. But with that knowledge, it did make getting out of this hangar a lot easier. The remainder of Cairo Station threw more elites at us God damn! As we ventured back to deactivate the bomb the opposition had boarded the station with. Look at this motherfucker. Hey, where are they, man? Dumbass motherfucker!
For a brick, he flew pretty good.
Chief, get inside. Gear up. We're taking this fight to the surface.
We were headed for the surface. Landing point, outskirts. The first part of this mission almost replicates a tower defense. We have an outpost that we have to defend from multiple waves of enemies. Now, this mission introduces what may be the most tilting thing in this entire game. Jackals. Jackals are the game's sniper enemy. However, what makes them particularly annoying in this game is wherever they're encountered, they are stupidly well hidden. You could get shot, not know from where, and have no time to react. Just... After enough tries, you'll very quickly begin to remember their spawn locations. Other than the jackals, however, the waves come and go pretty quickly. The only other challenge held within this part of the mission is at the end of the waves, where the game decides to introduce us to two completely new enemies out of the blue. Despite how they may look, they're pretty passive, so playing cover well and staying hidden allows you to stay out of their sight pretty easily. But in terms of attacking them, they have bullet resistant armor all over their body. To be able to kill them, you'll have to shoot in between the cracks of their armor enough times to take them down. I clearly didn't get the memo. Straight after that section was another particularly tricky part to maneuver through. A long corridor with jackals all along the building line. All this required was a lot of trial and error, and what I don't doubt was a fair amount of luck as well. Beyond that, we treaded carefully through the next area and linked up with some allies. Oh my god, Jesus Christ, you just get the fuck out of me, bro. With our allies by our side, we get airdropped a Warthog and take a drive down the beach. The upcoming areas are our first encounters with vehicle combat on Legendary. To be completely honest, I prefer getting out of the vehicle and taking them down from a distance whenever I had the chance. This wasn't all the time, but the Warthog definitely proved useful at certain parts. Balancing my time in and out of the car allowed me to strategically take down the snipers from a distance and the elites in the Warthog. Oh, the snipers also one-shot you in the car too. Of course they do. Who let this guy on my turret? Wait, excuse me sir, this is my car! The latter part of the mission takes us on a long drive, and I mean long, down and out of the outskirts. Except I didn't have a vehicle, so I kinda had to run the whole way. One good thing was that the enemies didn't pose too much of a challenge, as I was able to find long range weapons throughout the entirety of this road to take them down from a distance and jack their own vehicles to combat their bigger forms of opposition. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Okay. Maybe I need a car. Reaching the end of that road led us to the Metropolis. A mission which doesn't cause too much trouble because of this thing. The game gives you a tank to fend for yourself as you cross over a large bridge into the Metropolis, and thus, whilst you still need to be careful simply due to the amount of damage everything does, you can get through the tank section with relatively no worries. One useful thing to keep in mind is that no matter how much damage the tank takes, it won't blow up until your health reaches 0. So the only way you die in the tank is if your own health reaches 0 in the tank. Learning this definitely allowed me to tackle different foes with much more confidence. Past the tank section, we encountered a roadblock and thus had to make the rest of the way on foot. In this section, the game cleverly places jackals in the crevices of the forward area, in addition to hiding invisible elites, but every time you respawn they're exactly where you found them, so outplaying their tricks became clockwork. Oh, okay, we're good. The area outside was much more lush with both greenery and jackals, once again an area which slow play was mandatory, only taking one step at a time and trying to react faster than all of the jackals that see you. What the fuck, bro, tried to trick shot me? Let me tell you something good about those jackals. Whenever they're defeated, they always leave behind a sniper for you to pick up and use, so for the following area, I picked off the opposition from a distance and simply picked another one up whenever I was out of ammo. The remainder of the mission teams us up with allies in ghosts and warthogs to break through the line of defences the opposition has set up, and then face off against the Scarab.
G'day, mate.
Yeah, good day to you too. Thankfully we don't have to fight that thing, rather board it. And eliminate all of the enemies on it. Once again, the plasma pistol combo always works a treat in taking down the elites, and thus allowing us to shut down its operation. Remember that creature we saw getting tortured? He was exiled, albeit facing a zealous punishment, but those in control saw his undeserved punishment, and decided he was a right fit for a role to redetermine the fate of the Halo's power. Our missions now interweave between the Chief and this one, the Arbiter.
You are the Arbiter, the will of the prophets, but these are my elites. Their lives matter to me, yours does not.
Gameplay as the Arbiter, I'd say, favours our challenge. Whilst there's no doubt in my mind that the Arbiter has some of the more difficult missions objectively, he also has an invisibility ability that very often acts as a get out of jail free card. So with the things we've learned so far, coupled with our newfound ability, it makes surviving as the Arbiter a little easier than it has been so far. Not only that, but with the Arbiter, the range of weapons you have available to you is a little different. You won't exactly be finding battle rifles and magnums, so to compromise, I chose the Covenant carbine to couple with my plasma pistols. The mission was going by pretty flawlessly, I must admit. We go through the hangar area with little trouble, likely due to the teammates the game gives us, but then came across a small junction with plasma bombs passing from side to side, basically preventing you from being able to cross over until all of the enemies were defeated. The problem with this is that I had a lack of appropriate weaponry to do so, probably due to my own fault. But I had to rely on the little teammates that had survived long enough to make it here, to be able to get past this section. Nonetheless, I made it with enough tries and continued down the narrow pathways into the unknown. As more time passed, I started to figure out more and more use cases for our invisibility. And one specific case that helped me massively is that using invisibility before entering a room allowed me to briefly scout out that room and get an idea on where certain enemies were hiding before actually having to encounter them. At the end of those narrow passageways, we see someone enter into a flying vehicle just on the other side of the glass. After defeating the enemies who ambushed us, we followed after him in a ship of our own, thus introducing our first flying section. I would be lying if I said these didn't cause me any trouble. All along the skylines of the buildings were enemies holding energy rocket launchers of some kind, destroying the ship in either 1 or 2 shots. Not only that, but there was what felt like infinitely spawning opposing ships that we had to take down to make sure the ship that we were protecting didn't get too damaged. It was a game of perception and observation. Once all the soldiers along the skylines were taken out, destroying the ships became much easier. Can I? Oh shit. I'm not doing that again. Getting to our landing zone safely led us to the Oracle. The Oracle is the first mission to introduce what many people believe to be the most painful enemy type in the game. The Flood.
The Flood.
With no clear weak point, sporadic movement, and unfamiliar behaviour to anything we've encountered so far, the Flood pose the biggest challenge we've seen so far from our enemies. The mission begins with a message from our opposition, with a sudden ambush from the Flood. Luckily, our first encounter with them went smoothly, but I wish I could say the same with the ones to follow. What did follow was an elevator, with an increasing number of the Flood jumping on board and trying to take us down. What this did do was teach me a lot about how they act in small areas, as they like to jump around and launch themselves at you quite a lot. Our invisibility was the sole thing attributable to getting us through a lot of the close combat engagements with the Flood. In the next room, there were well placed turrets that oversee a lot of the room, so I utilised them to proper efficiency and continued on ahead.
This will save me from the storm, but you will be consumed.
We'll never break through this. Then we shall force him out. How? The cable.
With that, we ventured to the top of the tower with little pushback and found ourselves at the arena waiting atop with 3 cables holding the tower upright. It felt as if there were non-stop enemies approaching us consisting of both the Flood and Sentinels, and as such, my ammunition was running low fast. After figuring out how to cut the cables, our descent began. I don't doubt the intended approach was to fight off the waves as you cut each cable, but due to my lack of supplies, I cut the last 2 in quick succession and doing my best to avoid the enemies that were spawning in. With the tower falling, we made our way back down to where we needed to be and took off in a Banshee to chase after our escapee. Whilst fighting multiple Banshees at once proved a little annoying, once I started to get a hang of how it moved, like I didn't even know you could boost until now, I got my way by. After landing, we chased the heretic back into the hangar we began the mission at. Our chase leads to his cornering in the hangar we found ourselves in earlier, except now without any allies to help us. His shtick is that he creates clones of himself to disguise his true location, and they all hit like trucks. Low-key, this shit was kinda hard because any moment when you think you're being sneaky, bang, dead. He has waves of clones that you defeat, but if you're observant enough you could pick the right clone, and defeating that one will immediately end both the respective wave and then the fight. Weirdly enough, the energy sword was a useful choice of weaponry at times in the fight. Combining it with the invisibility, it can instantly kill a clone if you hit them in the right place. After enough tries and a little bit of luck, we were able to take him down.
Unfortunate. His edification was most enjoyable.
I had no choice, Holy Oracle.
With the Arbiter's mission complete, we were back over with the Chief, whose team had discovered another Halo, except this one acting as a weapon of galactic destruction. We were sent down to investigate what was going on in the contents of this halo. Our mission? Delta Halo.
Mind the bump.
Immediately we're thrown into a battlefield, but with our allies, we're able to clear the field of our opposition pretty easily. In doing so, however, our allies all fell to our opposition's hands. So whatever was to follow, we had to tackle alone. Soon enough, enemy liches arrived to deploy troops, some of which went down quickly, some of which didn't. One of the dropships deployed 3 different invisible elites, and I really had some difficulty in taking these 3 down. There was pieces of cover dotted all over the arena, and thus, with the clever elite AI, especially on Legendary, they'll hide in corners and around angles you don't expect, waiting for you and one-shotting you before you even realise. Getting around this posed quite the challenge, but making the 3v1 into 3 1v1s with my plasma pistol in hand posed a lot easier of a time taking them down. After them, a ship of our own came down to provide us with both a Warthog and some allies. With the Warthog, there were a few areas to tackle that were based around vehicle combat, but there wasn't all too much struggle that was posed by them. There were the necessary deaths to learn what approach to take, but there wasn't really anything I'd say was of notable difficulty until we got out of the vehicle. Upon arriving to the temple, we made our way in and fought through the initial waves of enemies until we found ourselves at this valley.
Nice places.
Which, whilst absolutely beautiful, was the worst thing that we had encountered yet. The approach was simple. Pick off the jackals with the sniper I already had, defeat the elites and the minor enemies, then fall back and defeat the additional enemies that approached in waves following the defeat of the initial ones. I even had a couple allies to help me out. And things did go to plan somewhat, until I'd found myself in a pretty sore spot. One bad checkpoint meant that as the approaching waves of enemies were coming in, I wasn't exactly in the best position, nor did I have the time to run back, because even if I wanted to, the jackals were already in position to pick me off. However, if I pushed forwards, then there were elites waiting for me, and I didn't exactly have the best arsenal to deal with them currently. All I can say is that I was waiting for a miracle to find its way to me. As soon as I spawned, I headshot 3 of the approaching enemies. Run back, find cover, whilst praying that none of the 3 jackals that had spawned hit me, turn around, headshot the final enemy that was chasing me. Then, despite already knowing my location, very carefully creep around each pixel and react faster than all 3 jackals with their eyes on me to pick them off just to have some breathing room. But breathing room was all I needed. With some necessary space, I was able to outplay all of the remaining opposition in the valley and continue past this point, thinking there was literally nothing else that could stop me. The conclusion of Delta Halo required us to enter into this sanctuary of sorts, and upon finding this hologram, we knew who we were dealing with. Regret. Regret begins with an ambush by the exact hologram we ended the previous mission at. A few elites caught me out a couple times, but nothing we couldn't get past. Once outside, there were jackals everywhere. Thankfully, I did have a sniper, but having to memorize their locations and slowly creep around each corner did take a second for me to figure out, especially now that the game had started to introduce multiple jackals watching the same angles. Once at the center of this structure, a dropship suddenly drops 2 of those armored enemies that we saw previously, except now with a much smaller arena to have to deal with them in. Despite how it may seem, I didn't really struggle all too much. Their attacks are slow and give you plenty of time to move out of the way or get into cover, so just making sure you hit all of your shots makes these guys a pushover at best. After traversing across the water, we took a submarine down into the depths of where we had arrived, emerging at the forefront of Regret's chamber. There was one room placed in front of us causing a little bit of annoyance. With combined efforts from jackals, those armoured enemies and the guards of this place, it caused a little bit of a hectic experience, but nothing we couldn't handle. We took another one of those submarines and worked through an area with some sunlight. The height advantage that the enemies had in this position did prove quite difficult to work with. No matter what angle I tried, they were always first to the gun, so I had to really take my time and slow play each enemy that decided to peek me, staying conscious of my ammunition and grenade supply. Beyond that, there was one final moving platform we used to cross the water once again and approach the main temple. Upon entering into the main temple, we approach Regret's chamber. He stuck me, that son of a bitch. Regret took me a little while to figure out. I didn't have too much difficulty in taking out the ads, as I stayed back and plasma pistoled all of the guards who posed a threat. Rather, I had difficulty in actually taking down the boss himself. Now remember, I hadn't played Halo 2 before this, and since I was on Legendary, I was terrified of literally everything. I keep as much distance between myself and anything else as possible, except that philosophy doesn't work when the mechanic of the boss literally requires me to jump on his ship and beat him up. I don't think it needs to be said that this took me a while to figure out, but luckily actually killing the boss caused no issue, because I had killed every single ad in the arena already. Regret's defeat unfortunately led to the chief getting caught in an explosion and submerged underwater.
This is not your grave, but you are welcome in it.
Meanwhile, the Arbiter was approaching the very thing he was looking for, the Sacred Icon. Now, straight away, Sacred Icon is one of the only missions that I'm aware of that at certain points in the mission has infinitely respawning enemies. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but this run was done with the intention of killing everything that we came across, which has stood the test of time for now, because if you know the right shortcuts, I mean, you can complete this game without even seeing any enemies at all. But that's not what we're here to do. So for the duration of this mission, there were sections that running by and using my invisibility was the most appropriate course of action due to those infinitely respawning enemies. Despite that, we did still run into trouble, such as this guy. Just a short ways into the mission, we're met with this shielded mech with strategically placed tunnels below him to be able to catch him off guard with his slow turning circle and shoot him in the back. What caused an issue is his absurdly large health pool. It felt like no matter how many bullets I put into him, he sponged them all, and not to mention the constantly spawning aerial enemies to annoy us. But after using up like 4 different guns, ammunitions reserves, and a few plasma grenades, he goes down. To which we used the platform he was guarding to cross over and make our way through the wall we were approaching. Unfortunately for us, the Flood started to get involved as well. Whilst they acted in our interests, helping us in some sense by killing the mechs for us, we now had to deal with a combination of both the mechs and the Flood as well. Sections with purely the Flood were what caused the most issues. However, I couldn't say that they compared to the issues we've overcome so far. What I will say is that the Flood often use weapons that the humans do too. Battle rifles, magnums, snipers, etc. So whilst killing them may be difficult, the reward is well worth it in ammunition for the best guns to kill them with. There were a few more of those shielded mechs that we had to tackle, particularly this one. For some reason this just genuinely felt a little bit unfair. With infinitely respawning Flood and aerial enemies, I felt like I didn't even have a second to breathe. Let alone actually doing damage to the enemy. Was in a position in a way in which so it was basically impossible to get shots in on his back. Pause. Yeah, this one took a while. Just a lot of trial and error. But beyond that arena were a lot of passages with too many enemies to count, all until we arrived at a few fairly long slides to lead us outside of that mess inside the walls. Outside were some allies that helped us combat a few incoming waves of the Flood, in which taking down took us to the quarantine zone.
Parasite is not to be trifled with. I hope you know what you're doing.
The quarantine zone. Look, I don't even know what I did to deserve having to do this mission and then Gravemind back to back, but Lord, we're in for a journey over these 2 missions. Okay, we begin by being dropped a Reaper, this vehicle, which we're going to be using for the large majority of this mission. I will admit, the vehicle combat on Legendary wasn't too bad until this point, but this mission alone made me never want to ever enter another car in this game again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. With this Reaper, literally the first room we had to fight in took me like an hour. There was a lot of opposition in this room. Notably, 2 more of those shielded mechs. But now, with the turret on the back being operated by one of our allies, they didn't end up being too much of a challenge, not to mention that there were steady waves of incoming ghosts arriving in small packs to try and disturb our peace as we picked off the enemies from afar. With the Reaper, these ghosts were small fry in the grand scale of things, but getting caught in between a few at a time would lead to quite an untimely demise. Nevertheless, the first obstacle that there was to overcome in this room is for some reason they just slapped a tank in the middle of it. Now, we're familiar with how these tanks operate. Just a few missions ago, we were using one ourselves to infiltrate, but now, being on the other side of one, it's tough. Just one shot from its rocket launcher kills us. No leniency whatsoever. You're shot, you're dead. Which is what caused so much trouble trying to get past it. You had to position yourself just right. You were out of the sight line from its rockets, but within the sight line of your own gunner to shoot it. A very fine balancing game that, in the absence of perfection, led to having to do the whole room from the start. But if that wasn't enough, after defeating the tank, a Warthog comes barging through the doors, guns blazing, a vehicle which is much more comparable to the one we're in, except ours is a little bit slower to maneuver. This was the other obstacle. For some reason, it always felt butting heads with this Warthog led to our death over theirs every single time. So it wasn't a game of luck I was playing, more so a game of strategy. After more attempts than I'd like to admit, I devised a strategy of my own. After taking everything else out in the room, and just before the Warthog arrives, I quickly switch out of the driver's seat and get into the turret, leaving my ally in control of the Reaper. Whilst I'd love to admit that the allies are good drivers, they're not. Why are you going so damn slow? But I was a better shot than them. I just had to make sure that I took the Warthog down with enough pace to leave our vehicle standing at the end, in which I did. Allowing us to move past what was the first room in this mission. Oh nah, these motherfuckers done turned me into a ballerina, bro. I'm done. After that room, I headed outside to arrive at literally the very next arena, which also caused me some trouble. Albeit, the main issue here is that at the points to cross over where I needed to go, there were grunts placed very carefully holding rocket launchers, waiting for you to cross over and killing you before you knew what was going on. Despite the time it took me, the solution was simple. Get out of the vehicle and snipe them from a very particular spot where I was able to see them, but they weren't able to see me. Otherwise, the areas that followed paled in comparison to the difficulty that the prior caused me. I had started to get used to the vehicle and how my teammates act within it, allowing me to get through the arenas without much difficulty. Y'all coming with or not? We ventured into the crashed aircraft, having to tackle both the Flood and the mechs once again, coming out on the other side having taken my time with the enemies contained within it. Graciously, the game had gifted us a tank to use in the upcoming sections, of which I was more than happy to oblige and found no difficulty in using. In said tank, we made our way over the snowy terrain, all until we arrived into this structure, where the last foe I had to face in this mission was this moving platform. Over the course of this platform's arrival, Flood will, well, flood the platform in tremendous numbers. Now the game does try to help us by providing us some teammates, but they just die so quick that it becomes a game of ring around the rosy with the Flood, slowly but surely picking off their numbers. Without the couple rockets that I saved from earlier, I don't know whether it would have been possible or not. After it, we arrived at the Sacred Icons location.
And I, Tartarus, chieftain of the brutes, will send you to it.
And the prophets learn of this, that they will take your head.
When they learn. Fool. They ordered me to do it.
In the depths of this godforsaken place, a creature who, in contrast to its appearance, helped us in some sense, providing aid to transport both the Chief and the Arbiter to the very place that needed them most. Beginning with the Chief, who was transported to the very heart of the High Chamber.
Kill the demon!
Who did this, you might ask? Gravemind.
Then I will show it to you.
I don't even know how to explain my experience in this mission properly. Just look at this.
Brutes!
If I even attempted to portray my time completing Gravemind, it would take me an hour alone. Just assume every room took me at least 20 or 30 tries to get past. I think that'll fit the bill. This mission is quite infamous, for many believing it's one of the hardest missions ever created. Needless to say, I was slightly terrified as to what that might involve for my time here. As I mentioned, we're transported into the High Chamber at the heart of our opposition's forces. We start the mission with nothing but a needler to fend for ourselves as we're introduced to a new enemy type, and maybe the most ruthless we've seen so far. Brutes. Just so we both acknowledge just how annoying brutes are, give me a minute to explain how they work. They very often come in pairs and whilst a mission to defeat on their own. If that wasn't enough, once one is defeated, the other becomes enraged, completely switching its combat style and turning into a W key melee spamming bitch. To avoid this, which I wanted to, I gradually took both of their health bars down just enough to being close to dead, and then taken them down at relatively the same time. As much as I was trying to do this, it didn't exactly go to plan every time, but it did help me stay alive. Nevertheless, after making it out of the initial room, I continued down and moved down towards the lower levels. Yo, that looks incredible. Bro, I was admiring the view, man. The next significant part of the mission involves our descent into this room, the prison, if you will. Throughout this room, our comrades are contained within holding cells, and to release them, we need to eliminate all of those who oppose us. Except, we're dropped straight into the middle of everything. After almost an hour, I released all of our teammates and continued back up the lift we used to descend down here. Oh no. That motherfucker's gonna be waiting up there for me, isn't he? Oh, maybe not. This door, by the way, is just pure evil. It only opens when you get close enough, or to reveal 5 of the worst enemies in the game, in which you have no time to react. Evil. Once reaching the higher level, I found myself in this room. I swear they just slapped these guys wherever is the most inconvenient. There weren't no slouch either, considering how narrow the room was. Having time to shoot their vulnerable spots while staying out of their attacks wasn't exactly easy, so I tried to brute force my way through it and it worked. Jackals. Of course there's jackals. This mission had everything else besides jackals. After a couple different arenas consisting of almost everything we've fought so far on this journey, of which I just fought from a distance with a sniper, I ain't ashamed, we arrive at a bridge in which 2 sides were battling. I just kinda let them do their thing because I didn't want to intervene. I just got turned on. Hey yo, pause, whoa! All before cleaning up the leftovers and continuing on to what was the final room intended to cause some trouble. There was one particular enemy causing most of that trouble by himself. Quickly picking off with the sniper allowed me to deal with the rest of the room fairly easily. There were a few invisible enemies introduced, causing me a little bit of annoyance. But after enough attempts, we saw them perish. Beyond that room was where the chief's comrades were being escorted.
Split them up, one in each phantom.
The hopes of all the Covenant rest on your shoulders, chieftain.
My faith is strong. I will not fail.
The Arbiter had found his way to where he was destined to be. The Uprising. The initial area caused a little trouble due to the weapon selection we had available. It was filled with brutes holding either grenade launchers, plasma rifles, or energy swords. It didn't keep me for too long, but it did show me a great lesson to learn about brutes in numbers being a pain to deal with. He's emoting on me, this is too far, this guy's gonna piss me off. The next part to cause issues was this steep arena, looking down on an army of enemies shooting back up at me. The great deal of problems was just how uncomfortable I felt shooting down to them. If ever I overpeaked for just a second, then it's lights out because of how many of them were looking back up at me. Not to mention the room just after that with like 10 brutes. Like, come on game, throw me a bone or something. The one thing I definitely learned from this mission is that the brutes are brutal. Soon enough, we arrived outside and needing to engage in some vehicle combat. Despite that, I only ever found myself using the vehicle if completely necessary. Otherwise, after arriving at where I thought enemies may be, I'd get out and snipe them from a distance to eliminate any chance of my vehicle blowing up and leaving me stranded. After making my way to the canyon floor, yet even more brutes were waiting for me, and jackals. Yay. All being said, I started to get really used to how to deal with these brutes, so after memorizing the locations of the jackals, I was able to get by pretty quickly. Oh fuck. Continuing on, we come out on the other side of the canyon to surprise those that were still alive.
By the rings, Arbiter.
Whereas back with the chief, he's forced to chase after a Forerunner ship with hopes of stopping them and preventing the eventual use of Halo's destruction. His mission? High Charity. The chief wasn't safe from the overwhelming amount of brutes either. Straight away we're thrown into a war between the Flood and the brutes having to intervene and combat maybe the two worst enemy types there is when having to fight them in packs.
The Floods too shall fail.
Those flying sons of bitches too now. Okay, the three worst enemy types in packs. Despite how it may look, the game gives us more than enough sniper ammo to stay far enough away to kill everything before it sees us. Oh no. Oh, I'm dead. Fuck this. Soon we arrived at what might have been my worst enemy towards the end of the run. This simple dark room, except completely overrun with packs of the Flood. Not to mention holding shotguns. Just look at this. What the fuck just happened, bro? There was nothing special I can say I did to get past this. I didn't even have room to think of anything cool to do, so I just relied on Lady Luck to bless me and eventually got past it. Sweeping through the waves of Flood invading High Charity, we eventually saw ourselves at an elevator to take us to the final challenge of this mission. This room. Containing elites, jackals, barely any good cover, and to top it off, constantly intervening waves of Flood who, for some reason, always run after me instead of the things they're in war with. Long story short, this room was a lot tougher than expected. My strategy? Shoot the beginning grunts to initiate combat, then stay towards the back of the arena to allow the opposition to fight each other until I'm able to come in and clean up the leftovers. This worked surprisingly well due to the impaired sight of the Flood. Beyond that room, the final hallway preventing us to get into that Forerunner ship. With the chief in the right position to finish the mission, the final task was in the hands of the Arbiter. To prevent the Great Journey.
There is still time to stop the key from turning.
I must get inside. Then mount up, Arbiter. I know a way to break those doors.
Our final mission begins jumping on the back of our teammate's vehicle and shooting down the enemies in our way. Thankfully, they didn't pose too much of a threat, and the parts which I saw to be slightly puzzling, I simply swapped positions with my ally so I was in control and he was shooting. Man, you fucking dumbass, you gonna shoot me or what? Wait, hold on. Once inside, we were gifted with some armoured allies to cut through the opposition for a large majority of the mission, not causing any issues because we let them do a lot of the heavy lifting. What did cause some trouble was the only room we didn't have teammates. The remaining allies were being held within cells. To free them, we had to clear out the opposition in this room and release them from their holding. What kept causing the biggest issue was the brutes with grenade launchers. If I was caught out of position even for the slightest moment, I was dead. Not to mention how many of them there actually were. It felt as if they were continuously respawning, but alas, we were able to free our teammates. The Arbiter teams up with Sergeant Johnson, who had found his way into a scarab in which we're going to use to infiltrate the Sacred Icon's location. For the next little while, we used a Banshee to protect the scarab, in which we allowed the Sergeant to get into position and carve us away into the heart of where we needed to be. Here we were, at the foothill of the Great Journey and Tartarus' Mercy. The final boss in this game is placed on what I have to admit is a horrible arena, but we're not making excuses. His mechanic is that he has an invincibility shield, in which nothing penetrates except the sniper that Sergeant Johnson is holding. For Tartarus to become vulnerable, Johnson has to hit him with his sniper rifle 3 times for us to be able to deal damage. This alone took me a lot longer than I'd like to admit to figure out, but once I did, it was a long game of cat and mouse, making sure above anything that I didn't get hit by his hammer, because any contact with it whatsoever meant instant death. What the fuck? My strategy? Utilize the carbines around the arena and headshot him as many times during his vulnerability. This alone was difficult considering Tartarus' speed, but to top it off, brutes flooded the arena in waves to throw off any momentum you think you might have. After what was a long time coming and took many deaths to see, Tartarus finally fell to our rifle.